What is going on, fellow Call of Duty fans out there in the world? Now, first things first, this isn't necessarily a Call of Duty channel. Usually, the Call of Duty videos I post only get like 10 views. I know I only got 30 subscribers, but honestly, I'm pretty interested and I follow the Call of Duty League quite a bit, and it'd be pretty cool. I don't know if more people started to care about this stuff. And I've actually been doing pretty well in pick'ems in the last week, as well as I got the DraftKings Sportsbook pulled up, as well as Breaking Point. And pretty much what I'm going to be doing today is predicting the Major 1 bracket that starts tomorrow. And just especially for round one, all these Thursday matchups, maybe going through what some of the odds might look like, where some of the value is. But first, I want to go through some credentials. I scored 28 points last week, including betting on some lines on DraftKings. On day one, Carolina Roar Ravens upsetting Optic Texas. I literally had that perfect at 3-1. To me, this one just came down to the overload, and Optic has been really struggling in overload. And if Carolina won that, which they did, I felt the series could go in their hands, especially in the respawns. Optic's pretty good at S&D, but they've been struggling in respawns. And so that just came out to a 3-1. I got that perfect. Gentlemate's not a perfect score here, but I still had them on top of the Toronto Koi. They end up winning 3-2. This match on Saturday, not so well. I had them 3-0. This kind of depended on what went down on this match for Toronto, but they really slid. I don't think anyone expected G2 to 3-0 them like this. However, even though I had Toronto 3-1 in the pick'ems, I actually did the morning of Saturday just make a Saturday whole parlay, and my parlay piece from this game was G2 plus 1.5. G2 is underrated. I think they've been playing well recently, keeping games close. We'll talk about them in a bit when we get to them in the bracket. So I actually did win that plus 1.5, just didn't win them in the pick'ems that I made. I probably made these 2 days before the entire weekend started. And then the Falcons over Cloud9. I had them 3-1, and I'll be honest, I'm not going to lie to you guys and say that I was perfect in all the bets that I placed. I actually had Falcons minus 1.5 on the spread. I thought they would beat Cloud9 at least 3-0 or even 3-1. Cloud9 ends up winning that map 4, forcing it to a game 5. So I don't win that spread off the Falcons. However, like I said, in that Saturday parlay piece, I played it safe with just Falcons money line, and the fact that they were kind of able to destroy Cloud9 in that map 5 kept my parlay alive, which leads us to the last leg of that day. I originally had Thieves 3-1. They ended up winning 3-2. However, the last leg of my parlay piece for Saturday was Breach plus 2.5. And they ended up hitting that on map 1. I stopped watching. I turned it off. I said, great day. Plus 2.5 hits. I think Breach, just like G2, are a very underrated team. We'll talk about them when we get to the bracket as well. However, the Thieves handled business. They were heavily favored in this series and barely come out on top in a Game 5 against the Breach. And then we'll talk about the Thieves on Sunday too, because they actually played another Game 5 that they didn't win. We'll talk about Gentlemates versus Miami first, though. I had them 3-2. I figured this was going to be a close match. I think Miami might be a little underrated too. A lot of underrated teams. This is going to be a good major this weekend. I really do think that the bracket is good and the matchups are good tomorrow. GA ends up winning 3-1. A couple of bets I had was just the Paris money line that hit. It was pretty expensive, but I cashed out and actually went even in this game because the other piece that I had was just a small piece on Miami to win map 1. Miami has been pretty darn good at hardpoints recently. Little did I know that Paris Gentlemates are pretty much the best hardpoint team in the league. But Miami was actually up 100 in that hardpoint map 1. They're up 120-20 against Paris. They find a way to choke it. Paris comes back. Miami actually ends up winning the S&D. That's their one map win. Paris gets it done. I went even in that matchup. But this was the big one. Much like Carolina versus Optic, I had a little bit on Carolina money line, a little bit of Carolina plus 1.5, a little bit on the over 3.5 maps in the series because these teams, Optic and LA, heavily favored against Carolina. But Carolina's hot, man. They're on a 5-game win streak. They've turned it around since Succeed comes in for Slasher. I predicted a perfect 3-2 win for Carolina Royal Ravens. Cashed out big. I even used my double points boost on this matchup to go all out, and that's where a lot of my 28 points comes from. Last match of the day was easy. I don't even know why they gave us double points. If you didn't have FaZe 3-0ing Surge, I don't know what you're doing. And let's just clear the air real quick so that there's no bias involved in this bracket. A lot of brackets you guys probably watch on YouTube and predictions, they might be biased because there's a lot of LA Thieves fans out there, obviously a lot of Optic fans, might even get some FaZe fans. I'm a Vancouver Surge fan, folks. I'm from Seattle. I liked the Seattle Surge. I stayed with them. I'm a loyal fan with Vancouver. Top two. They were the second best team all of last year in Black Ops 6. They drop everyone. They're dead last. So that's how you know. With all these other matchups and teams, you won't see as much bias because I'm a Surge fan and I'm real with my team. They're dead last. They're not winning the map in this bracket. But that was just a quick little credentials, so you know what's good. All right, you're not just saying, oh, this guy doesn't know ball. I'm not going to listen to him at all. But here we go. We're going first up tomorrow morning with Paris versus Toronto. And I took some notes last night. I went pretty in depth with the breaking point research for this first round. So once I get past this first round and that's predicted, I'll pretty much cruise through the rest of the bracket, because you have to be right in the first round to get the second and losers bracket rounds correct anyway. So I'm not really going to do much head-to-head matchup research on these matches. Just the round one matches that we know are pretty much a lock. So, for the first match, Paris versus Toronto, the first thing I have written down is Toronto will win map 3. Toronto Koi is one of, if not the best overload teams in the game. And Paris, they're one of the best hardpoint teams. They have the edge in S&D, but they do not have the edge in overload. In fact, when these teams matched up last week, it went game 5, and part of that reason was because Toronto won that map 3, that overload. I also have written down Paris go to the hardpoint, but Koi is right there. So Toronto's not bad at hardpoint, but I do expect, here's my prediction, I do expect on LAN, Paris is the number 1 seed. They're the better team. I do expect, even though the hardpoints are pretty close, I expect them to come out and win that map 1, and maybe even that map 2, because Paris does have quite the clear edge in S&D. That's where Toronto struggles. They've been struggling closing out game 5s, and they just can't buy an S&D. They're decent at hardpoint. But where they're probably going to win that map, I'm honestly going to give Paris the first 2 maps. Toronto probably wins that map 3 overload, makes it a series. However, just on LAN, and that's going to be a subject of discussion a lot in this video, is LAN is different from online. You can take these online records into account as much as you want, but really, you never know what's going to happen day 1 of LAN on the first tournament of the year. I have Paris closing out both hardpoints and the first S&D. I have them winning 3-1. In terms of bets, we'll go to DraftKings here, look at the odds for this match. Paris is favored by a lot, minus 310. Their spread's at minus 1.5. The spreads are kind of even. So you're really only getting value on Toronto if it goes map 5. This would win, and then maybe you hope for them to win the S&D, which they probably won't because they suck at S&D. Honestly, I think most of the value here is on Paris minus 1.5. They just went game 5, but I think on LAN, the skill gap is going to show a little bit more, and Paris can probably get this done in 4. And something I also thought was interesting, if we go to the map props, if I can find them here, I just want to prove to you how much Toronto is good at overload, how good they really are. They're actually favored to win the overload match over Paris. Paris is heavily favored to win the opening hardpoint, favored to win the S&D up 2-0, but then, like I said, Toronto's that good at overload, Paris is that bad at overload. Toronto probably wins that. You can see it. So there's honestly not even any value there. It's just a prediction. The only value you probably get here is with Paris minus 1.5 at minus 120. Next match, we are going to probably the most unpredictable matchup in the entire round 1 tomorrow of Major 1, and that is the Carolina Royal Ravens and the LA Thieves. Like I said in the pick'ems, these teams just matched up literally on Saturday or on Sunday, actually, literally 3 days ago. They went to a game 5. It was actually Carolina winning the first 2 maps. LA Thieves win maps 3 and 4. They're going for the reverse sweep. In game 5, they're up 5-3 in the S&D. Carolina wins the last 3 rounds to barely squeak out a game 5, round 11 against LA Thieves. And a big topic of discussion was a lot of the Thieves players laughing and smiling after they lost that round 11. Some people didn't like that, but honestly, I'm going to be real with you guys. I'm not worried about it. What I have written down for this matchup is that the Thieves probably win map 3. We're talking about the overload again, because these teams are actually pretty even in hardpoint. They're actually bottom, half of the league in hardpoint, both of these teams. I can show you some stats over here on Breaking Point. This is the hardpoint win percentage, and as we see, the LA Thieves are ninth in hardpoint. That's actually kind of crazy. This roster should be a lot better at hardpoint, but you see Carolina even worse in hardpoint. Carolina in these Breaking Point stats, I want you guys to take with a grain of salt because they were pretty much like one of the worst teams in the league when Slasher was on the team, but when they brought in Exceed, they should be like top 3 in everything. They haven't even lost with Exceed. So 11th in hardpoint. I mean, obviously they're getting it done with the S&D, but my point is they're pretty even in the hardpoint. Maybe the Thieves have a slight edge. If we look at S&D, look at the S&D win percentage, put that at the top. Carolina is number 1. This even includes with Slasher. That's just how you know how good the Royal Ravens are at S&D. The Thieves aren't bad at S&D. They're better at S&D than they are at hardpoint, but you just see a clear edge with Carolina there. And then the overload, however, so we see kind of a slight edge in the series maybe towards Carolina. The overload is pretty even. However, these two teams squared up on overload the other day, and the Thieves I think they beat them like 7-0 to start that reverse sweep process. And so I honestly give the edge to the Thieves in the overload. In fact, I think Carolina, their last few games, the maps that they have lost are in that overload game mode. So I think the Thieves win map 3, and I think these teams split both the hard points and the S&Ds. Pretty even. There was a lot of thought going into this last night, a lot of research, but what it came down to at the end of the day was I just simply trust LAT more. I doubt Scrap loses to the same team twice. You saw him laughing at the end of that game. Carolina thinks they're on top, they're better. I think playing them back to back, it's going to be hard for this Thieves team to lose to this team twice in a row. So I'm giving the win to the LA Thieves. I know they're heavy favorites, and I know Carolina has beat them, and Carolina has won 5 games in a row. But they've done all of this online with Exceed. Exceed hasn't even been with the team. They come to LAN. It might be a little bit different, and I just have a feeling that the LA Thieves are going to scrap that last loss on it being online, and they're going to come with an extra chip on their shoulder on LAN and maybe even demolish this Carolina team. I think whether they win 3-0, 3-1, or 3-2, I just trust this LA team to not lose back-to-back games to the Carolina Royal Ravens. However, for my pick'em, honestly, I'm going to be ballsy and just say they 3-0 them. I don't think a lot of people are going to have this. Some people might even have Carolina winning or going map 5. That's probably the obvious pick. But I'm going to go crazy and just say the Thieves come out with an extra gear here tomorrow and 3-0 the Carolina Royal Ravens. That doesn't mean they blow them out. Like, it could be a 2-point hard point, game around 11 S&D, a close overload. But I'm, close matches, but I'm picking Thieves to get it done 3-0. The bets really, once again, the only one I'm looking at is maybe the Thieves money line and a parlay piece, because even though I have them 3-0ing, it's too risky. This Carolina Royal Ravens team has looked too good. I think it could go map 5, but I just trust the ice and the fire in the LA Thieves team roster. The Thieves money line is probably all I'm going to take, maybe in a parlay piece. Maybe even do it with Paris in that first match, or do it with the Paris spread. Depends on how risky I'm feeling. But those are what I have for the first 2 matches so far. We're going to go down to FaZe versus G2 Minnesota. This is actually the last match of the day, but we'll talk about it first. We'll leave the banger for last. FaZe and G2, maybe not as exciting as a matchup as you'd think on paper at first, but when you realize G2 has actually G2 has beat FaZe twice this year. They're 2-0 against FaZe this year. They beat him at the Kickoff Classic tournament, and they beat him 2 weeks ago in online qualifiers 3-1. And G2, I'm telling you, is an underrated team. They're specifically a hardpoint team. In all of their losses, I think they went 3-4 in the split, or maybe 2-5. I don't know, but they had to have gone 3-4 because they're in the winners bracket. They're a hardpoint team, and in all their losses, it was like game 5. They kept all of their matches close, just weren't able to close out series in game 5s. Excuse me. But in the last 2 matches, they actually got it done. I think they beat the Boston Breach, and they beat even FaZe Vegas. Very impressive wins. No, they didn't beat the Boston Breach, did they? We'll check it because they 3-0 Toronto. That's what they did last weekend. The weekend before that, they beat FaZe. Very impressive. Do they have any other matches? They don't. Let's see what they did in week 3. Okay, they lost to game 5 and lost to game 5. Okay, so they've won 2 in a row, but then before that, just a couple of close losses. And all I'm trying to say is this team is underrated, okay? However, you look at FaZe Vegas, and even though they're the number 2 seed or 3 seed, honestly, I don't know what they are. I think they're 2 seed. I just know Paris is 1 seed. They're 2 or 3 phases. They're probably my favorite team going in to win this whole bracket. I think they have the most solid team, especially in S&D. S&D wins championships. But here's what I have written down. G2 is a hardpoint team. Overload probably their weakest game mode. So you like FaZe to win the Overload for sure. And the S&D is honestly 50-50 for G2, but they have a hard time winning game 5s. They're 2-0 against FaZe, obviously. FaZe probably wins map 3. They're the better Overload team. And FaZe has a clear edge in S&D. So honestly, here's what I'm doing. Kind of a similar thought to my map 1s for Paris and Thieves. I think FaZe are just the better team, and they can come out and win map 1 on LAN. Just with that fire, they're the better team. They're going to come out strong. They have the clear edge in S&D and the clear edge in Overload. I have this written down as a FaZe 3-0. However, when we talk about value for bets, we're going to go to this matchup here. I told you that G2 is a hard point team. That's probably, honestly, FaZe's weakest game modes. FaZe is very good at S&D and pretty good at Overload. Probably the weakest at hard point. We can even go here. Check it out right here. Win percentage. Gentlemate's obviously number 1. FaZe is 8th. They've only won 50% of their hard points. Definitely their weakest game mode. And then you go up to G2 Minnesota. Gosh, this website's being kind of glitchy. They're 4th. They have actually quite the edge against FaZe in hardpoint. When you look at the map props for this series, again, I have FaZe 3-0. Maybe they win 3-1 if G2 can win this map 1 hardpoint. These odds are so skewed. FaZe is heavily favored in map 1. This is a hardpoint when G2's actually been the better hardpoint team this year. So when looking at bets, I think FaZe is way too expensive on any money line or spread. But if you want to take a shot, put some pizza money on G2 to win map 1 because they're the better hardpoint team. I think that's the only value you can find in this entire series. I honestly might sprinkle it, but for the pick'ems today, I trust FaZe. I'm not betting against MVP Simp. That dude looks like he's on another level right now. We're going FaZe to 3-0 G2 Minnesota. Maybe it's that value on hardpoint in that hardpoint number 1. And if they can win that first hardpoint G2, maybe they win map 4. Maybe they're just hardpoint juggernauts and force us to a game 5. But I think no matter what happens, FaZe is the better S&D team, and they win that Overload, and they win this series. Last but not least, I know all you Optic fanboys want to hear about this one and what I have to say about this one. We have the Riyadh Falcons, one of the hottest teams in the league, taking on the Optic Texas, one of the coldest teams in the league. And here's what I have written down for this one. The Falcons have won 5 Overloads in a row. They have hit another gear since those first 2 qualifying matchups, one of them being against Optic. They lost 3-0 to Optic in week 1 or week 2 of the online qualifiers 2 months ago back in December. But since then, they've won 5 Overloads in a row, and guess what? Optic has lost 4 Overloads in a row. The clear edge in Overload right now goes to the Falcons. I'm giving map 3 to the Riyadh Falcons. If we go to hardpoint, it looks like Optic actually has a slight edge in the hardpoint. If we go to map 1, maybe who's going to win this? You got Riyadh Falcons actually negative in hardpoint. They only win 42% of the time, where Optic wins 50% of the time. On LAN, Optic's getting their rings from last year's champs. It's their home event. You maybe like some crowd antics to go on, and maybe Optic come out and win that map 1 hardpoint. Where am I? So I'm going to take that. The S&Ds, I actually think that the Riyadh Falcons have a slight edge in the S&D. If we go to S&D and even just look at recently, so Carolina obviously number 1. Falcons have cooked in S&D. They've won 2/3 of all their S&D matches. Optic is right there, so maybe just lost 1 more S&D than Riyadh has. So just a very slight edge for the Falcons in S&D. I'm going to give it to them. I think they bounce back, and I think that win that overload. They win that overload, then you're coming down to a Game 4 hardpoint. Like, I think between the map 2 and the map 4, those probably get split. Whether Optic goes up 2-0 or it's 1-1, I think we're seeing a Game 5 here regardless, with just the home crowd behind them, the adrenaline and emotion from the ring ceremony. I think Optic is going to come out with a little bit better play on LAN than we've seen them in the last couple of weeks of online qualifiers. But at the end of the day, if you just look at recent performance, especially in S&D, the Falcons are on fire. They've won 5 maps in a row. They have the edge in S&D. Optic has struggled really recently, losing 3 of their last 4 matches. And they've dropped, really. I mean, they were a top team to start the year. Everyone was putting them at number 1 in the power rankings. But something's going on, and just off of value alone, I don't want to pick all the favorites. I'm 3-0 picking favorites. This is going to be my one upset in round 1. I think the Falcons get it done. I really like Pred against this Optic team. I remember last year the Falcons only win all year, or is their first win all year, whichever one it was, or both. I actually picked the Falcons to beat Optic last year just because I had Pred up against his old team, and that man has some fire. You know, Pred on the main stage on LAN can come out and just swing at you, and there's no going back. He'll just punch you in the face, and I like that to happen in this Game 5. I think Falcons take this one in 5. We look at value here in this match for Falcons and Optic. Obviously, Optic's going to be favored pretty much with the same line as the Thieves versus Ravens. And I think where the value here is honestly on Falcons' money line. You can take the plus 1.5 if you want to be safe, but honestly, that's pretty expensive. And I think if it gets to a map 5, Falcons have the edge in S&D, so I'd rather just take this value on their money line right there. The other one I'm looking at in the map props for this matchup is that map 3 overload. You see Optic as heavy favorites at minus 170 in the overload, but they've lost 4 overloads in a row, and this Falcons team has won 5 overloads in a row. As with underdog value plus money right there, I think that's great value. I might even put more on this than the money line itself, just in case Optic clutches up in the end. But that is my round 1 match predictions. We'll kind of cruise through the rest of this bracket here now. Now that I don't have research to back up my opinions. Hope you guys are enjoying the show. Grab your snacks. We're going to cruise through this. Thanks for sticking around this long if you have, and here we go. Toronto, Miami. I think Miami's very underrated. Miami's very good at hardpoints, so is Toronto. They probably split the hardpoints if we even get that far. Toronto's a very good overload team. Do we think Miami wins the search? They just want to search. I think this one goes Game 5. And in a Game 5, honestly, I think that G2 sweep on Toronto, I think the Toronto Koi slide might have to be studied. I got Miami taking this one. I think Miami's an underrated team. They weren't together practicing for the majority of the online qualifiers. They got kind of a slow start to the year. But I think at this major one, they're on LAN, they're together, they can talk shit over. I think we kind of see a bit of a Miami Heretics surge here. And I got Toronto, top 12, getting pounced in the first round. Carolina, we don't even have to talk about this match, all right? The Surge are diabolically bad, all right? And this is my team, guys. You know, I'll be cheering for them. But trust me, where my money's going is on Carolina Royal Ravens minus 2.5. Bet that sweep with everything you have. I promise you the Surge on LAN are not winning a map, okay? And after this, they're going to probably blow up this roster. I think, who was it, Abe and Tej maybe look all right, but Lunars is just not good, and I don't even know the other guy, okay? Haven't been paying too much attention to my team this year. I still love them, and I hope they turn it around. But in terms of Major 1, they're going nowhere fast, all right? G2 and Boston at Breach, the 2 teams I said were underrated in the online qualifiers. G2 looks hot, but in my prediction, they're coming off a 3-0 loss to FaZe. Boston Breach, underrated. I love the play of Nasty. If Purge can stay consistent, this can be a good team. Snoopy has pop-off ability, and Cammy honestly looks better this year, in my opinion, than he has in years past. This is going to be a very good match. In fact, I kind of want to pause this and go look at their previous matches and see what's good. All right, I found it pretty quickly. They played in Week 2 qualifiers back in December, and Breach won that matchup 3-2. I had predicted a 3-1. I like the Boston Breach. On LAN, do they get this done against a pretty hot G2 team? G2's pretty darn good at hardpoint. I just want to look really quick and see where Boston is. Boston's bad at S&D. Boston's decent at hardpoint, but G2 Minnesota is better. Boston's very good at overload. G2's not good at overload. So what we're seeing here, just looked it up. Boston does not have the edge in hardpoint or S&D, but they have the edge in overload, and I think they can make this a map here. I think this goes Game 5 just like they did in the online qualifiers. Man, who wins this Game 5? This is tough. I just think G2 looks better as of recent. Yeah, but Boston's so underrated. I hate that one of these two teams is going to go out in the first round. You know what? Boston had to go to Game 5 to beat Cloud9. Yeah, give me Minnesota. I'll take Minnesota in Game 5 and maybe a Game 5 round 11. Just the fact that Boston's in the losers bracket maybe tells you something, that G2, did a little bit more to fight to get into that winners bracket. So I trust G2 a little bit more, but I'm telling you, don't sleep on this Boston team too much. I think they got something solid here, and if they could find a winners bracket spot at the next major, maybe they could do some damage. Optic and Cloud9, I don't think this is much of a competition. Mac and Vivid are solid. I think Mac is actually very good. Vivid just dances around a 1.0, and then the other two guys, Beans and Afro, are having a rough time here on Black Ops 7. Does Cloud9 get a map? I'm going to say no. I'll just take Optic with the 3-0. That way all the Optic fanboys don't come at me. Cloud9 is not very good. They're maybe a step above Seattle, and then after that, they're the worst two teams in the league, and after that, everyone's actually pretty good. We'll continue here. This says Friday, and that's Saturday, so this is actually also going to happen in this day. Who's got the hot hand? Carolina off a 3-0, Miami off a nail-biter Game 5. Does Carolina get it together after getting dropped down to losers? Honestly, I want to do something crazy. I think I have another. I'm into Miami. I'm predicting Miami to go on a little bit of a run here. I think they're a little bit underrated, and once they just get their team together, they actually are pretty good. Rencor's solid, and yeah, I think they upset Carolina. And Carolina drops out top 8 after only beating the Vancouver Surge, almost at Seattle. So yeah, give me Miami to move on. Go down here to Saturday, first match of the day in the morning. Ooh, the Optic Killers, Minnesota Rocker is what they used to be. Minnesota maybe has an hard point edge. Both teams are pretty bad at overload. Maybe Optic finally wins an overload against Cloud9. Maybe they don't. I think I trust G2 in these respawns more, honestly. I think if G2 wins this match, it's going to be 3-1 off of the respawns. But if Optic wins it, it'll be in a Game 5 S&D. But I have Optic going out early. I'm sorry. I think G2 they've come back and won a couple matches, and they look strong. In fact, maybe this match, this 3-0 right here, is more just me betting on FaZe than it is fading G2. I think G2 has a solid team, and they've looked better. They've impressed me down the stretch, and so give me G2 to knock out Optic. I'm sorry, don't turn the video off. I'm going to go fast here, Optic fans. You'll see who wins it all. We'll start up here with Paris and LA Thieves. I think if Thieves find that gear and beat the Ravens, I actually think this Paris team is a little overrated. Like, they have the number 1 seed, but something about this roster, Ghosty, Envoy, Sib, Neptune, those are all like B+ players, maybe. Like, maybe a couple of them are A- at best, but they don't have superstars like a Beezy, like Hydra, like Scrap. This whole tournament, let's be honest, is going to come down to Kenny. The Thieves' performance here and Kenny's performance here will determine if he gets dropped after this. I could very well see Kenny being terrible and getting dropped. I don't see that happening. I think Kenny does enough, and I think on land, the Thieves find another gear. Paris is very good at hardpoint. I expect them to win maybe another match. I'll take the Thieves 3-2 in a close one at the end here to win that S&D. And then we go down here to FaZe versus Falcons. And I liked the Falcons matchup-wise versus Optic, and they've been hot. But their toughest game mode is hardpoint. That's also FaZe's toughest game mode. And I'm gonna take FaZe on that. They probably I'll give the Falcons a map, or will I? Does FaZe close us out in a hard point in map 4? I'm gonna go 3-0. I'm all over FaZe. I think this is a bad matchup spot for the Falcons. I think they're better than than getting 3-0'd. But I just think FaZe has the edge. Maybe Falcons win the overload, and that's their key. But I'm just gonna say FaZe comes out on Saturday and whoops them. So we got FaZe and Thieves in the final. We'll drop down to the losers. I love this. Usually, when teams that aren't S tier drop down to the losers, they don't have the momentum, and teams coming out of losers coming up have the momentum. I got Miami beating the Falcons. Sure, give Riyadh the overload or something, maybe a hard point. I think they get 3-1 and Falcons get bounced. Paris and G2, kind of similar, but I said that when an S tier team drops down, they usually get 3-0 stomped. In fact, I'll take Miami 3-0. I'll stick with my guns. That's my betting trend. Ride the momentum with Miami. But Paris is an S tier team. They don't get S tier teams don't drop down to losers and get 3-0'd by hot teams on momentum. Hardpoint battle right here. 2 top tier hardpoint teams. I like Paris to bounce back though. They have a better S&D team and they're better at overload. Maybe G2 wins that map 1 hardpoint. I'll give them that. That momentum from beating Optic is that adrenaline's going to carry over to the map 1. But then Paris, I think that roster is too solid for a team like G2 to keep up with. I'll take the Gentlemates to at least get top 4. In fact, I think this is where Miami's run comes to an end. I don't think they can compete with Paris, even if it goes map 5, which I don't think it will. Because they're just too good at respawns, especially, and a hardpoint. I mean, they're the best hardpoint team in the league. So I'll take the Gentlemates to beat Miami. I'll maybe give Miami an S&D. But Gentlemates will at least get top 3 and win the rest. We go to the winners bracket finals. Thieves versus FaZe. Thieves haven't been good in hardpoint. Very underwhelming, really. And even though that's FaZe's worst game mode, I'm telling you guys, I really like FaZe this major. I think the Thieves have problems, and they've shown it. That's why they're not a top 3 seed. They only went 4-3, I believe. Optic has kind of trended downwards in the second half of the online qualifiers. And you look at the third team, maybe this is the team to beat. FaZe hasn't played them yet in this tournament that I'm predicting right now. Of course, I'll give Thieves a map or 2. I mean, at this point, I'm predicting FaZe hasn't even lost a map yet. So maybe FaZe gets some veto, or not FaZe, but Thieves get some veto cheese and take map 1, but I like him in the overload. I'll give Thieves a couple maps. If I'm taking the Thieves this far, I'm not going to act like they're just getting 3-0 bounced by FaZe, all right? It's not like FaZe has the godliest roster ever, okay? So I'll say in a map 5, FaZe is too strong in S&D, though. And then you got Thieves and Gentlemates. A rematch. I had the Thieves last time, but I'm taking the momentum with the Gentlemates this time. And I'll take them to 3-0. I think Kenny has a horrific series, and Paris kind of shows some dominance there. So yeah, now we have our finals. And now that I've talked it through, if we go to some more DraftKings odds and we go to futures for this winner of Major 1. I love how you can bet on this. The 2 favorites. Number 1 favorite is Paris Gentlemates at plus 250. Number 2 favorite's FaZe at plus 275. I mean, I made this knowing that, but also I didn't make these 2 the finalists because of that. I think it's interesting and maybe shows something that these 2 are my finalists. And they're the top 2 favorites. And I am in a best of 7. I am going to have FaZe winning this just because they're the best S&D team in the league right now. I'll give Paris a map or 2 off a hard point. In fact, I'm really only going to give them 1, maybe. But I think FaZe has the best S&D team, and if they can just get it rolling in overload, it's their tournament to lose, and I think they have. I mean, I trust this FaZe roster to get it done. Hopefully the grand final woos end for Abuza in 04, and they don't get stomped in the grand finals again like they did all of last year. But anyways, yeah, I think I think the fact that Paris is the number one favorite, I think you got some value on FaZe to win it all. You can even bet on the finalists. Probably not much value with Paris or FaZe. If you want to take a sleeper finalist, honestly, from my case, I have Miami going on a bit of a run, but I don't see them being a top 2 team. Like, no way. Top 4 at best. They're probably at the 5 and 6. Most teams have Miami probably at like 8, 9, 10 in the league. Like 9 or 10. I'll put them at 5 and 6 for this tournament as a sleeper. But I really don't see any of these teams making the grand finals. No G2, no Falcons, no Toronto. Maybe Carolina if they just continue to be dominant. I'm predicting that it stops here on land, but if you believe in this roster and this team, this is probably your best value for a sleeper team to make the finals. But yeah, I'm probably just going to rock with FaZe just because I love this roster going in this tournament. I love the way they're playing, and also Paris needs to win some S&Ds and not just hard points. Optic needs to put in another gear, and they can. You know, I think this honestly has some value too. They've shown Optic in years past being offline online qualifiers and then just showing up on LAN and being unbeatable. Just absolutely being 3-0ing everyone unbeatable. So honestly, there could be some value with Optic and Thieves, but I don't know, man. Kenny, I think he gets dropped after this major. We'll end it right there, though. Let me know who you guys have winning, and if you agree or disagree with my picks, let me know where your value's at. And yeah, that's it from me. Subscribe if you want more Call of Duty content, and yeah, I'll talk to you. Peace.